Welcome to Shadows of the Past, where the darkest corners of human history are laid bare. Tonight, we invite you to lie back, close your eyes, and let the gentle sound of rain guide you into a world of chilling true crime stories. These are not tales of fiction, but real events, stories of betrayal, rage, and the relentless pursuit of justice. From a pastor's brutal murder in a quiet Tennessee town to a governor's fall from grace in a scandal that shook a nation, each case will pull you deeper into the shadows. Our stories are crafted to haunt, to provoke, and to linger long after the rain fades. This is volume 32, a collection of 10 cases that unravel the fragility of trust and the weight of hidden truth. So, dim the lights, let the world slip away, and join us as we step into the past. But be warned, once you enter these stories, there's no turning back. Let's begin with a case that tore a family apart and left a father searching for answers in the wake of unthinkable loss. Part 1. The murder of Cory Desmond. In the early hours of Valentine's Day 2009, a woman stepped out of a bustling bar in a small American town, her laughter echoing into the chilly night. Her name was Cory Desmond, a 29-year-old with a radiant smile and a life full of promise. By dawn, she would be gone. Her body discarded like refuse, her story silenced. This is the story of Cory's murder, a case that would unravel over years, driven by a father's unyielding quest for justice and a killer's chilling confession. Settle in, for this tale is one of heartbreak, deception, and the shadows that linger when truth is buried. Cory was no ordinary woman. Born in 1980, she was a fighter from the start, overcoming a life-threatening illness as a child with a spirit that refused to break. Her intelligence shone through in her academic pursuits. She earned a master's degree in criminal justice, a field that fascinated her. But Cory's heart led her to a different calling, teaching children with autism. By day, she poured her energy into shaping young lives. By night, she worked as a bartender, her warmth and quick wit making her a favorite among patrons. Cory was a woman who lived fully, loved deeply, and left an impression on everyone she met. She was, in every sense, unforgettable. On the night of February 14th, Cory was at the Street Lounge, a local haunt where she often met friends. The bar was alive with the hum of conversation, the clink of glasses, and the pulse of music. Cory was in her element, laughing with regulars, her presence lighting up the room. Around 2 a.m., she decided to call it a night. She stepped outside, her breath visible in the cold air, and vanished into the darkness. No one saw her leave. No one heard a scream. It was as if the night had swallowed her whole. 2 days later, a grim discovery shattered the town's quiet. A passerby spotted a trash bag discarded along a rural road some 100 miles from the Street Lounge. Inside was Cory's body. She had been strangled, her body battered with multiple wounds. The brutality was staggering. Her neck bore the marks of a killer's hands, her face bruised from a savage assault. The scene suggested a crime of rage, but the distance from the bar hinted at calculation. Who could have done this to a woman so beloved, and why? Cory's father, Mark Desmond, was a man of quiet strength, but the news of his daughter's death broke him. Cory was his world, the daughter who had defied the odds, who had made him proud every day. Refusing to let her memory fade, Mark became a one-man crusade for justice. He erected billboards across the county, plastering Cory's smiling face alongside a plea for answers. He offered a $155,000 0-cents reward, scraping together every penny he could. Someone knows something, he told anyone who will listen. I won't stop until they're found. The police, meanwhile, were grasping at straws. The Street Lounge was their starting point. Witnesses recalled a man arguing with Cory that night, a heated exchange that had drawn attention. The man, a regular patron, was brought in for questioning. He admitted to the argument, but swore he hadn't followed her outside. To prove his innocence, he agreed to a polygraph test. The results were conclusive. He wasn't lying. With the prime suspect cleared, the investigation stalled. Months turned into years, and Cory's case grew cold, her file gathering dust in a precinct drawer. Mark's billboards faded into the sun, but his resolve did not. Then, in 2010, a breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A woman named Tiffany stepped forward, her voice trembling as she spoke to detectives. Tiffany was the girlfriend of a man named Tony Lopez Perez, and she had a story to tell, a story that would crack the case wide open. According to Tiffany, Tony had been acting strangely since Cory's disappearance. He was moody, withdrawn, and prone to sudden outbursts. One night, after too many drinks, he let something slip. I didn't mean to hurt her, he mumbled, his eyes distant. Tiffany pressed him, and the truth spilled out like poison. Tony claimed he'd been at the street lounge that night, lurking in the parking lot. He saw Cory leave alone and approached her, offering a ride. What happened next, he said, was an accident. Cory tripped, hit her head, and started screaming. Panicked, Tony grabbed her, his hands tightening around her throat to silence her. When he realized she wasn't breathing, he stuffed her body into a trash bag and drove 100 miles to dump it. It was a story of impulse, fear, and a desperate cover-up. Or so he wanted Tiffany to believe. But the evidence told a different tale. The wounds on Corinne's body weren't the result of a fall. The strangulation marks were deep, deliberate, suggesting a prolonged struggle. The multiple bruises on her face and torso spoke of a violent, intentional attack. This was no accident. This was murder. Detectives brought Tony in, and under pressure, his story unraveled. He couldn't explain the distance he'd driven to dispose of the body or the care he'd taken to hide his tracks. His claim of panic didn't hold up against the cold calculation of his actions. As investigators dug deeper, they uncovered a disturbing portrait of Tony Lopez Perez. He was a man with a history of volatility, known for his temper and a tendency to fixate on women who caught his eye. Cory, with her confidence and charisma, had likely drawn his attention at the bar. Whether he'd planned to kill her or acted on a twisted impulse, one thing was clear. Tony had targeted her, and he'd gone to great lengths to erase his crime. The trash bag, the remote dumping ground, it was the work of someone who thought he could outsmart the law. In 2011, Tony stood trial for Cory's murder. The courtroom was heavy with tension as Cory Desmond sat in the front row, his eyes fixed on the man who had taken his daughter. The prosecution laid out a meticulous case, weaving together Tiffany's testimony, the forensic evidence, and Tony's own contradictory statements. The defense argued that Tony was a man caught in a moment of panic, not a cold-blooded killer, but the jury saw through the lies. After hours of deliberation, they returned a verdict. Guilty of first-degree murder, Tony was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years. For Mark, the verdict was bittersweet. Justice had been served, but it couldn't bring Cory back. He stood outside the courthouse, the weight of years of grief etched into his face. "She was my everything," he said, his voice breaking. "I hope she knows we never gave up." Mark continued to honor Cory's memory, speaking at community events about the dangers of violence against women. He turned his pain into purpose, ensuring his daughter's legacy would live on. But questions linger, even now. What drove Tony to such a brutal act? Was it a fleeting obsession, a spark of rage, or something darker that festered within him? The street lounge, once a place of laughter, became a grim reminder of how quickly joy can turn to tragedy. And what of Tiffany, the woman whose courage broke the case open? She faded into the background, her role in the story overshadowed by the horror of what she'd uncovered. Cory's case is a stark reminder of the fragility of life and the shadows that lurk in the most ordinary places: a bar, a parking lot, a cold February night. These are the settings where lives are changed forever. It's a story of a father's love, a community's loss, and the slow, grinding wheels of justice. As we leave Cory's tale, we're left to wonder, how many others like her are out there? Their stories untold. Their killers walking free. The rain falls harder now, blurring the edges of the past, but Cory's light shines on. A beak in the darkness. Part 2, The Vanishing of Jackie Waller. The rain taps softly against the window, a steady rhythm that masks the secrets buried in the quiet corners of a small town. In Cape Girardeau, Missouri, a woman named Jackie Waller lived a life that seemed ordinary. A devoted mother, a loyal sister, a woman rebuilding her world after years of pain. But on June 20th, 2011, Jackie stepped into a lawyer's office to finalize her escape from a toxic marriage, and then she vanished. Her disappearance would unravel a web of deceit, betrayal, and a husband's chilling descent into violence. This is the story of Jackie Waller, a tale of love turned lethal, and the relentless search for truth that followed. Close your eyes, let the rain pull you under, and step into the shadows of a case that will haunt you long after the last word fades. Jackie Waller was a woman of resilience, her warmth and strength touching everyone she knew. Born in 1962, she grew up in a close, knit family. Her bond with her sister Cheryl, a cornerstone of her life. Jackie was a nurturer, the kind of person who put others first, whether it was her 2 children or the friends who leaned on her for support. Her smile could light up a room, but behind it lay a quiet struggle. For years, Jackie was trapped in a marriage to Clay Waller, a man whose charm had long since eroded into laziness and cruelty. Clay was a drifter, a man who shirked responsibility and ruled the home with an iron fist. Arguments turned to shoves, shoves to blows, and Jackie bore the bruises in silence, shielding her children from the worst of it. By 2011, Jackie had had enough. She filed for divorce, a decision that took every ounce of her courage. She moved in with Cheryl, finding solace in her sister's home, a sanctuary where she could breathe again. Jackie was reclaiming her life, piece by piece. She threw herself into her work as a nurse, her compassion for patients, a reflection of her own healing heart. Her children, now teenagers, were her reason to keep going, and she dreamed of a future free from fear. On June 1, Jackie had a meeting with Clay at their lawyer's office to finalize the divorce. It was meant to be the last step toward freedom. She left Cheryl's house that morning, promising to be back by afternoon. "I'll see you soon," she told her sister, her voice light with hope. Those were the last words Cheryl would ever hear her say. When Jackie didn't return home, Cheryl's unease grew. Hours passed and calls to Jackie's phone went straight to voicemail. By evening, Cheryl was frantic. She contacted the police, her voice trembling as she explained that her sister was missing. "This isn't like her," Cheryl insisted. "She wouldn't just leave without telling anyone." The police began their search, retracing Jackie's steps. They learned she'd made it to the lawyer's office, where she and Clay had signed the final paper. Witnesses described by Clay as calm, almost detached as he left the meeting. Jackie, they said, seemed relieved, as if a weight had been lifted. But somewhere between that office and Cheryl's house, Jackie had disappeared into thin air. The investigation zeroed in on Clay Waller almost immediately. His history of abuse was no secret. Neighbors had overheard screaming matches, and Jackie's friends had seen the marks he left on her. Cheryl was adamant Clay did something to her. "I know it." The police questioned Clay, who claimed he'd parted ways with Jackie after the meeting and hadn't seen her since. His story was simple, almost rehearsed, but his demeanor raised red flags. He was too calm, too uninvolved for a man whose wife had vanished. Detectives pressed him, but Clay stuck to his script, offering nothing but vague denials. Days later, a chilling discovery shifted the case. Jackie's minivan was found abandoned on a rural road, its tires slashed and a smear of blood on the driver's seat. The blood was Jackie's, confirmed by DNA, but it wasn't enough to tell the whole story. Was she injured, taken, dead? The slashed tires suggested sabotage, a deliberate act to strand her. The police scoured the area, combing through fields and forests, but found no trace of Jackie. The van became a silent witness, its secrets locked within its dented frame. Meanwhile, Clay's behavior grew stranger. He avoided the search efforts, refused to speak to the media, and seemed more concerned with his own convenience than his wife's fate. Weeks turned into months, and the case grew colder. Cheryl refused to let it die. She organized search parties, plastered missing posters across town, and hounded the police for updates. "Jackie's out there," she told herself, clinging to hope even as dread crept in. Behind the scenes, investigators were building a case against Clay. They searched his home, a cluttered trailer that reeked of neglect. What they found was damning: traces of Jackie's blood on the floor, a section of carpet hastily cut away, and furniture rearranged as if to hide something. The evidence painted a picture of a crime scene, but without a body. The case was circumstantial. Clay, sensing the noose tightening, doubled down on his denials, claiming the blood was from a minor accident months earlier. Then, 5 months after Jackie's disappearance, Clay slipped. In a moment of desperation, he threatened Cheryl during a heated phone call, his voice dripping with menace. "You're next, if you don't back off," he hissed. Cheryl reported the threat, and the police pounced, arresting Clay for harassment. It wasn't the murder charge they wanted, but it was a start. In custody, Clay's facade began to crack. Detectives leaned hard, confronting him with the blood evidence and his history of violence. "We know you did it, Clay," they said. "Tell us where she is." Faced with the prospect of life behind bars, Clay made a calculated move. He offered a deal. A guilty plea in exchange for a reduced sentence and a chance to reveal Jackie's fate. In 2013, Clay led investigators to a remote sandbar along the Mississippi River, a desolate stretch of land shrouded in mist. There, buried in the shifting dunes, was Jackie's body. She had been strangled, her neck bruised by the same hands that had once vowed to love her. The autopsy revealed a crime of rage, but also of premeditation. Clay had lured Jackie to a secluded spot after their meeting, knowing exactly what he planned to do. His story of a sudden argument didn't hold up. The slashed tires, the hidden body, the cleaned-up trailer, all pointed to a man who had orchestrated his wife's death with chilling precision. The courtroom was a theater of grief as Clay's trial unfolded. Cheryl sat in the front row, her eyes burning with a mix of sorrow and fury. The prosecution laid out a meticulous case, the blood in the van, the evidence in Clay's home and his own confession. They painted Clay as a predator, a man who couldn't let Jackie go, who saw her freedom as a threat to his control. The defense argued that Clay was a broken man, driven to a moment of madness by the stress of divorce. But the jury saw through the lies. In 2013, Clay Waller was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to 55 years in prison, a term that included additional charges for violating federal domestic violence laws. For Cheryl, the verdict was a hollow victory. She had her answers, but they came at a devastating cost. Jackie, the sister who had been her confidant, her rock, was gone forever. "She deserves so much better," Cheryl said, her voice trembling as she addressed the court. "Clay took her from us, but he can't take her memory." Cheryl channeled her grief into advocacy, speaking out about domestic violence and the warning signs she wished she'd seen sooner. She honored Jackie by living the life her sister had fought for, one of strength, love, and purpose. But the shadows of this case stretched far beyond the courtroom. What drove Clay to such a monstrous act? Was it pride, rage, or a twisted need to possess Jackie even in death? The sandbar where her body was found remains a silent monument to her loss, a place where the river whispers secrets no one can fully unravel. And what of the children left behind, caught between a mother's love and a father's betrayal? Their pain is a wound that time may never heal. Jackie's story is a stark reminder of the dangers that lurk behind closed doors. Domestic violence is a thief, stealing lives in plain sight, often unnoticed until it's too late. It's a tale of a woman who dared to break free, only to be silenced by the one she trusted most. As the rain falls harder, blurring the edges of this tragedy, we're left with a question. How many others like Jackie are out there, fighting for their freedom, their voices unheard? The darkness closes in, but Jackie's spirit endures, a beacon of resilience in a world too often stained by violence. Part 3, The Betrayal of Jane Hilton. The rain falls in a steady whisper, cloaking the world in a veil of quiet unease. In a suburban home filled with laughter and ambition, a woman named Jane Hilton built a life of purpose, her dreams intertwined with those she loved most. But on April 22, 2013, that life was shattered in a frenzy of violence, orchestrated by the one person she trusted above all others. This is the story of Jane Hilton's murder. A tale of friendship turned fatal, of secrets buried in plain sight, and a betrayal so profound it would leave a family forever broken. Lie back, let the rain draw you into the shadows, and prepare to uncover a truth that cuts deeper than any blade. Jane Hilton was a force of nature. Born in 1975, she grew up in a tight-knit community, her sharp mind and infectious energy setting her apart. Jamie was a political consultant, a rising star in a world of campaigns and causes. Her colleagues admired her intellect, her friends cherished her loyalty. She was the kind of woman who could light up a room with a single laugh, yet her compassion ran deep, always ready to lend a hand or listening ear. Jamie's life was anchored by her marriage to Nation Hahn, a man she'd met in her 20s. Together they built a home filled with love, their bond unbreakable, or so they thought. At the heart of their world was a third figure, Jonathan Brill, Nation's childhood friend. Jonathan was more than a friend, he was family. He and Nation had grown up together, sharing dreams, secrets, and a bond forged in the innocence of youth. Jamie welcomed Jonathan into their lives, treating him like a brother. When Jonathan announced he was battling cancer in 2012, Jamie and Nation didn't hesitate. They opened their home to him, offering a place to stay, meals, and unwavering support. Jamie, with her nurturing spirit, took charge of his care, cooking for him, driving him to appointments, and holding his hand through the fear. To Jamie, it was what family did. But beneath the surface, something sinister was brewing. Something no one could have foreseen. On the morning of April 22, 2013, Jamie was at home, her day filled with the usual rhythm of work and errands. Nation was at his office, and Jonathan was supposedly resting in the guest room. The house was quiet, the kind of stillness that feels safe, familiar. But around midday, that stillness erupted into chaos. Nation returned home unexpectedly to find the scene of unimaginable horror. Jamie lay on the kitchen floor, her body riddled with stab wounds, blood pooling beneath her. Nation, too, was attacked, his arms and chest slashed as he fought to protect his wife. The assailant? Jonathan Brill, the man they'd called family, now standing over Jamie with a knife in his hand, his eyes wild with a rage no one had ever seen. Nation managed to overpower Jonathan, restraining him until police arrived. Jamie was rushed to the hospital, but the wounds, 24 in total, each one a testament to the ferocity of the attack, were too severe. She clung to life for 2 days, surrounded by loved ones before slipping away. Nation, though injured, survived, his body scarred but his heart shattered. The police took Jonathan into custody, his clothes stained with Jamie's blood, his story incoherent. What could drive a man to such a brutal act against the woman who'd cared for him? The answer lay in a web of lies that would unravel in the days to come, each thread more shocking than the last. The investigation began with the question, why? Jonathan's initial claim was that he'd acted in a moment of panic, a sudden breakdown triggered by stress. But as detectives dug deeper, they uncovered a truth far darker. Jonathan Brill was not who he seemed. The cancer diagnosis? A fabrication. He'd never been sick, never needed treatment. The hospital visits, the medications, the tales of suffering, they were all part of an elaborate charade designed to manipulate Jamie and Nation's Jonathan had used their kindness as a weapon, worming his way into their home to conceal a far more sinister motive. Money. Jamie, in her role as a political consultant, had access to campaign funds, a responsibility she took seriously. Jonathan, it turned out, had been siphoning money from these accounts, embezzling over $50,000, 0 cents, to fuel his own lifestyle. He'd forged documents, diverted checks, and covered his tracks with the skill of a seasoned con man. But Jamie, ever meticulous, had noticed discrepancies. On the morning of April 22, she confronted Jonathan, her voice firm but calm. She demanded answers, threatening to expose his theft. For Jonathan, it was a moment of reckoning. Exposure meant ruin. Financial, social, and personal. In that kitchen, with Jamie standing her ground, Jonathan made a choice. He grabbed a knife, and the woman who trusted him became his victim. The evidence was overwhelming. The knife, still in Jonathan's possession when police arrived, bore his fingerprints and Jamie's blood. Security footage from the house showed no signs of an outsider, confirming Jonathan acted alone. His financial records revealed a trail of illicit transactions, each one tied to the campaign funds Jamie oversaw. And then there was Nation's testimony, a harrowing account of walking in on the attack, of seeing his wife's life drain away as he fought to save her. Jonathan's claim of a spontaneous breakdown crumbled under the weight of the facts. This was no moment of madness. It was a calculated act of desperation, a betrayal born of greed. As the case moved to trial in 2015, the courtroom became a stage for grief and outrage. Nation took the stand, his voice steady but heavy with loss. "She was my everything," he said, describing Jamie's laughter, her dreams, the future they'd planned. He recounted the horror of that day, the betrayal of a friend he'd trusted since childhood. Jamie's family, too, spoke, their words a mix of sorrow and fury. Her mother described Jamie as a light in their lives, a woman who gave without expecting anything in return. Jonathan took that light, she said, her voice breaking. He took her from us. The prosecution painted a damning picture of Jonathan Brill. They called him a predator, a man who'd exploited Jamie's kindness to fund his lies. The embellishment was just the beginning. His attack on Jamie was a desperate bid to silence her, to protect his house of cards. The 24 stab wounds weren't the work of a man in panic. They were the mark of rage, of a need to destroy the one person who'd seen through him. The defense argued that Jonathan was mentally unstable, driven to a breaking point by the pressure of his lies. But the jury saw the truth: a man who'd planned, deceived, and killed without remorse. After a swift deliberation, Jonathan was found guilty of first-degree murder and attempted murder for his attack on Nation. The sentence was life without parole, a punishment that ensured he'd never walk free again. For Nation, the verdict was a small measure of justice in a sea of loss. He left the courtroom a changed man, his faith and trust shattered, his future haunted by the absence of Jamie. He moved away, seeking solace in solitude, but Jamie's memory followed him, a reminder of love and the cost of betrayal. Her family, too, grappled with the void she left behind. They established a scholarship in her name, a tribute to her passion for helping others, ensuring her legacy would endure even as their grief did not fade. But the shadows of this case linger, raising questions that echo in the rain-soaked night. How could Jonathan Brill, a man who'd shared meals and memories with Jamie and Nation, harbor such darkness? Was his deception a slow poison, building over years, or a sudden plunge into desperation? The cancer lie, so meticulously crafted, speaks to a mind capable of chilling manipulation. Yet no one saw it coming. And what of the money he stole? Was it greed or something deeper? A need to control, to be more than the man he was. The kitchen where Jamie died remains a silent witness, its walls holding secrets only the dead could tell. Jamie's story is a stark warning of the dangers hidden in those we trust most. Friendship, like love, can be a refuge or a trap, its boundaries blurred by familiarity. It's a tale of a woman whose kindness became her undoing, and a man whose lies turned a home into a slaughterhouse. As the rain falls harder, washing away the traces of that fateful day, we're left to ponder. How well do we truly know those we call friends? Jamie Hahn's light was extinguished, but her story burns on. A haunting reminder that even in the warmth of trust, darkness can wait, patient and deadly. Art 4, The Unsolved Mystery of Liz Maria Lopez. The rain drums softly, a mournful cadence that echoes the sorrow of a family left in darkness. In the bustling streets of Houston, Texas, a young woman named Liz Maria Lopez carved out a life of quiet determination, her dreams as vibrant as the city around her. But on a warm evening in August 2007, Liz stepped out of her apartment to run a simple errand and vanished without a trace. Her disappearance would spark a desperate search, a tangle of theories, and a mystery that remains unsolved to this day. This is the story of Liz Maria Lopez, a tale of hope extinguished, of questions unanswered, and of a void that haunts those she left behind. Settle in, let the rain guide you, and step into the shadows of a case that refuses to rest. Liz Maria Lopez was a beacon of resilience. Born in 1983 to a working-class family, she grew up in a tight-knit Hispanic community where family was everything. Liz was the eldest of 3 siblings, a role she embraced with a fierce sense of responsibility. Her parents, Juan and Rosa, had immigrated from Mexico, instilling in Liz a deep pride in her heritage and a relentless work ethic. She was bright, with a quick wit and a smile that could disarm anyone. After high school, Liz enrolled in community college, studying to become a dental hygienist, a career that promised stability and a chance to give back. By 2007, at 24 years old, she was living in a modest apartment with her younger brother, Miguel, balancing school, a part-time job at a local diner, and dreams of a brighter future. Liz's life wasn't without its struggles. Her neighborhood, though vibrant, was rough around the edges, with crime rates that kept residents on edge. Liz was cautious, always locking her doors, avoiding late-night walks, and checking in with her family daily. Her parents described her as street smart, a woman who knew how to navigate the challenges of her world. She was also fiercely independent, determined to carve her own path while staying close to those she loved. Her bond with Miguel was particularly strong. The siblings shared everything from late-night talks to plans for their futures. To Miguel, Liz was more than a sister. She was his protector, his confidant, his hero. On August 15, 2007, the day began like any other. Liz woke early, attended a morning class, and worked a shift at the diner. She returned home around 6 p.m., chatting with Miguel about their plans for the weekend. Around 8 p.m., Liz mentioned she needed to run to a nearby convenience store to grab some groceries. "I'll be back in 20, she told Miguel, grabbing her keys in a small purse. The store was just 2 blocks away, a walk she'd made countless times. Miguel barely looked up from his video game, nodding as she left. The door clicked shut, and Liz stepped into the humid Houston night. She never returned. When an hour passed with no sign of Liz, Miguel's unease grew. He called her phone, but it went straight to voicemail. He walked to the store, hoping to find her there, but the clerk hadn't seen her. Panic set in. Miguel called his parents, who rushed to the apartment. By midnight, the family contacted the Houston Police Department reporting Liz missing. "She wouldn't just leave?" Rosa pleaded, her voice thick with fear. "Something's wrong." The police took the report, but their initial response was lukewarm. Liz was an adult, they said, and it hadn't been 24 hours. Perhaps she'd gone to a friend's house or needed space. But the Lopez family knew better. Liz was not the type to vanish without a word. The next morning, the police began a formal investigation. They retraced Liz's steps, starting with the convenience store. Security footage showed no sign of her, a chilling absence that suggested she'd never made it that far. Officers canvassed the neighborhood, knocking on doors and questioning residents, but no one had seen or heard anything unusual. The family scoured the area, putting up flyers with Liz's photo, her warm brown eyes staring out from every lamppost. "Please, help us find her," the flyers begged, listing a hotline number and a $5,000 0-cent reward scraped together by Juan and Rosa. The community rallied, organizing search parties that combed parks, alleys, and vacant lots. But the trail was cold from the start. As days turned into weeks, the investigation deepened. Detectives focused on Liz's personal life, looking for clues. She had no known enemies, no recent conflicts. Her relationships were stable. She'd been casually dating a classmate, Carlos, but he had an airtight alibi confirmed by multiple witnesses. Miguel was questioned, his grief palpable as he recounted their last moments together. "I should have gone with her," he said, his voice breaking. All right, the police also explored the possibility of a random crime, given the neighborhood's history of robberies and assaults, but Liz's purse, phone, and keys were missing, and there was no sign of a struggle. If it was a robbery, why take her? If it was something worse, where was she? A month into the search, a potential lead emerged. A neighbor reported seeing a dark-colored van parked near Liz's apartment that night, idling for several minutes before driving off. The description was vague, no license plate, no clear view of the driver, but it was the first tangible clue. Police issued a public appeal for information about the van, but no one came forward. Another tip came from a diner regular who claimed Liz had seemed on edge, and the days before her disappearance as if something was bothering her. When pressed, the man admitted he didn't know details, and the lead fizzled out. The investigation was grasping at shadows, each clue slipping through their fingers like smoke. The Lopez family refused to give up. Juan quit his job to focus on the search, spending his savings on private investigators and billboards. Rosa prayed daily, clutching a photo of Liz, her faith warring with despair. Miguel, consumed by guilt, dropped out of school, haunted by the thought that he could have saved her. The media picked up the story, and Liz's face appeared on local news. Her smile, a stark contrast to the grim headline, "Houston Woman Missing Family Pleads for Answers." But as months turned into years, the coverage faded, and Liz's case joined the ranks of Houston's unsolved mysteries. In 2010, a flicker of hope emerged. A construction crew working on a new development unearthed a set of human remains in a wooded area 10 miles from Liz's apartment. The Lopez family held their breath as forensic tests were conducted. Dental records and DNA confirmed the remains were not Liz's, crushing their hopes. The discovery, though unrelated, reignited public interest, prompting a fresh wave of tips. One caller claimed to have seen a woman matching Liz's description being forced into a van that night, but the tip was anonymous and details were too vague to pursue. Another theory suggested Liz might have been a victim of human trafficking, a growing concern in Houston at the time. Police investigated local rings but found no evidence linking Liz to their operations. By 2015, the case had grown cold, but the family's resolve hadn't. They held annual vigils, lighting candles and sharing memories of Liz's laughter, her dreams, her love for her family. "She's still out there," Juan told a small crowd at one vigil, his voice steady despite the tears in his eyes. "We won't stop until we know." The police, under pressure from the family, reopened the case, assigning a new detective to review the files. The detective focused on the dark van, cross-referencing it with vehicles registered in the area, but the trail was too old, the records incomplete. Advanced forensic techniques like genetic genealogy were considered, but without a body or crime scene, there was little to test. Today, Liz Maria Lopez's disappearance remains one of Houston's most perplexing mysteries. The police have no official suspects, no confirmed crime scene, and no body. The theories abound. Was Liz targeted by someone who knew her routine, perhaps a stalker from the diner? Did she stumble into a random act of violence, her fate sealed by chance? Or is there a darker truth hidden in the silence of that August night? The dark van remains a tantalizing clue, its driver a phantom who may hold the key to the truth. Some believe Liz was taken far from Houston, her identity erased in a world of shadows. Others fear she never left that neighborhood, her remains hidden in a place no one has thought to look. The Lopez family lives in a limbo of grief and hope. Juan and Rosa have aged beyond their years, their home a shrine to Liz's photos, candles, and a rosary draped over her favorite scarf. Miguel struggles with depression, blaming himself for letting her walk alone. The community still remembers Liz, her story a cautionary tale whispered among neighbors. Check on your loved ones, they say. Don't let them walk alone. The Houston Police Department keeps her file open, but resources are stretched thin, and new cases demand attention. Liz's face, frozen in time, stares out from fading posters, a silent plea for answers that may never come. The rain falls harder now, blurring the edges of Liz's story, but it cannot wash away the questions that linger. What happened in those fateful moments after she left her apartment? Who saw her last, and why have they stayed silent? The convenience store, just 2 blocks away, stands as a mocking reminder of how close she was to safety. Liz Maria Lopez was a daughter, a sister, a dreamer, whose light was snuffed out in an instant, leaving only echoes in its wake. Her story is a haunting reminder that some truths are buried too deep to uncover, some wounds too raw to heal. As the night deepens, we're left to wonder, is Liz still out there waiting to be found, or has the darkness claimed her forever? Part 5, The Tragedy of Keishla Rodríguez. The rain falls in a relentless whisper, each drop a reminder of tears shed in silence. In the vibrant streets of San Juan, Puerto Rico, a young woman named Keishla Rodríguez lived with a spirit that could outshine the sun. She was a dreamer, a fighter, a woman whose laughter filled the hearts of those around her. But on April 29th, 2021, Keishla vanished, her absence tearing through her family like a storm. What followed was a chilling tale of love twisted into obsession, of a betrayal so brutal it shocked a nation, and a search for justice that would not be denied. This is the story of Keishla Rodríguez, a tragedy that burns with rage and sorrow, a reminder that even the brightest lights can be extinguished by the darkest hearts. Lie back, let the rain pull you under, and step into the shadows of a case that will leave you breathless. Keishla Rodríguez was a force of life. Born in 1994, she grew up in a close, knit family, the youngest of 3 siblings. Her parents, Jose and Keila, raised her with love and discipline, nurturing her fierce independence and boundless ambition. Keishla was a natural athlete, excelling in boxing and track, her strength matched only by her compassion. She worked as a pet groomer, her gentle touch calming even the most anxious animals. Friends described her as a whirlwind, always moving, always laughing, always ready to lift others up. At 27, Keishla was building a life of purpose, saving for her own business and dreaming of a family of her own. Her smile was her signature, a beacon that drew people to her like moths to a flame. But beneath Keishla's vibrant exterior lay a complicated heart. For nearly a year, she had been in a secret relationship with Felix Verdejo, a rising star in Puerto Rico's boxing scene. Felix was charismatic, handsome, and married, a fact Keishla knew but believed would change. He promised her a future, whispering words of love that kept her tethered to him despite the lies. Their affair was a closely guarded secret, known only to a few trusted friends. Keishla, fiercely private, confided in her sister, Berlise, about her hopes for Felix to leave his wife. "He says he loves me," she told Berlise, her voice tinged with both hope and doubt. To Keishla, Felix was her dream. To Felix, she was a complication. On the morning of April 29, 2021, Keishla woke with a mix of excitement and nerves. She had news for Felix. She was pregnant. She texted him, asking to meet, her heart racing with the hope that this would solidify their bond. Felix agreed, suggesting they meet near her apartment in Carolina, a suburb of San Juan. Keishla left home around 8 a.m., telling her mother she'd be back soon. She climbed into Felix's black Dodge Durango and they drove off. It was the last time anyone saw her alive. When Keishla didn't return by afternoon, Keela's worry turned to panic. Calls to Keishla's phone went unanswered, her texts unread. By evening, the Rodríguez family reported her missing, their voices trembling with fear. She's not the type to disappear, Jose told police. Something's happened. The Puerto Rico Police Department launched an investigation, but the case took on a new urgency when Barrelese revealed Keisha's relationship with Felix Verdejo. Felix, a local celebrity, was a former Olympian and professional boxer with a fan base that spanned the island. His name carried weight, and the revelation sent shockwaves through the community. Police questioned Felix the next day, April 30. He was calm, almost detached, claiming he hadn't seen Keishla in weeks. "We're just friends," he said, his voice smooth as he denied any romantic involvement. But his story didn't hold up. Phone records showed multiple calls and texts between him and Keishla that morning, including one arranging their meeting. Felix's alibi was unraveling, and the police weren't letting go. On May 1, a grim discovery turned the case into a nightmare. A fisherman spotted a body floating in the San Jose Lagoon, a murky body of water near Carolina. It was Keishla. Her body was battered, her wrists bound with wire, and a cinder block tied to her waist in a crude attempt to keep her submerged. The autopsy revealed a brutal truth. Keishla had been beaten, injected with an unknown substance, and shot before being dumped in the lagoon. The pregnancy test in her system confirmed she was expecting a child who would never know life. The savagery of the crime stunned even seasoned investigators. This was no impulsive act. It was a calculated execution. The evidence pointed directly at Felix Verdejo. Witnesses reported seeing his black Durango near the lagoon on April 29, its distinctive chrome rims unmistakable. Surveillance footage captured the vehicle crossing a bridge over the lagoon that evening, a chilling timestamp of Keishla's final moments. Forensic analysis found traces of Keishla's blood in the Durango's trunk, along with fibers matching the wire used to bind her. But the most damning evidence came from an unexpected source. Luis Cadiz, a friend of Felix's who had been in the car that day. Luis, racked with guilt, turned himself in, offering a confession that would seal Felix's fate. According to Luis, Felix had been panicked when Keishla told him about the pregnancy, his marriage, his career, his public image. All were at risk. Felix saw only one way out. He lured Keishla to a secluded spot, claiming they needed to talk. There he attacked her, punching her repeatedly until she collapsed. Luis, who'd been waiting in the car, was roped into the cover-up. Felix injected Keishla with a substance later identified as fentanyl to ensure she wouldn't survive. They drove to the lagoon, where Felix shot her and dumped her body. The cinder block, a desperate attempt to hide his crime. Luis's confession was corroborated by phone records, GPS data, and the physical evidence, painting a picture of a man who'd chosen murder over accountability. Felix was arrested on May 2, charged with kidnapping, carjacking resulting in death, and the intentional killing of an unborn child. Federal charges that carried the possibility of the death penalty. Puerto Rico, a U.S. territory, erupted in outrage. Protests filled the streets, with thousands demanding justice for Keishla and an end to the island's epidemic of violence against women. Her face became a symbol, her story a rallying cry. Ya Dios Batab, ni una más, the crowds chanted. Not one more. Felix, once a hero, was now a pariah. His name synonymous with betrayal. The trial, held in 2023, was a spectacle of grief and fury. The Rodríguez family filled the courtroom, their pain palpable. Keila took the stand, clutching a photo of Keishla, her voice breaking as she described her daughter's dreams, her kindness, her stolen future. She trusted him, Keila said, glaring at Felix, and he took everything from her. Barrelese recounted Keishla's hopes for a life with Felix, her words a haunting echo of misplaced faith. The prosecution presented a mountain of evidence, the blood, the footage, Luis's testimony, and Felix's own lies. They portrayed him as a narcissist, a man who saw Keishla as a threat to his carefully curated life. The defense argued that Felix was under immense pressure, that the pregnancy pushed him to a breaking point. But the jury saw through the excuses. After a grueling trial, Felix Verdejo was found guilty on all counts. In 2024, he was sentenced to life without parole, a punishment that spared him the death penalty but ensured he'd never walk free. For the Rodriguez family, the verdict was a bittersweet triumph. Justice had been served, but it couldn't fill the void Keishla left behind. Jose and Keila channeled their grief into activism, founding a foundation in Keisha's name to support victims of domestic violence. Bareilles, haunted by her sister's trust in Felix, spoke at rallies, urging women to recognize the signs of toxic relationships. Keishla's story isn't just hers, Bareilles said. It's a warning to us all. The lagoon where Keishla was found became a site of pilgrimage, adorned with flowers and candles, a testament to a life cut short. Yet the shadows of this case linger, raising questions that gnaw at the soul. How did Felix Verdejo, a man with everything to lose, fall so far? Was his violence a sudden eruption, or had it simmered beneath his charm for years? The fentanyl injection, a detail so cold and deliberate, suggests a mind capable of chilling calculation. And what of Luis Kaddish, the accomplice who could have stopped it but didn't? His confession spared him a harsher sentence, but can he ever escape the weight of his silence? Keishla's unborn child, a life never given a chance, adds another layer of tragedy, a future stolen before it began. Keishla Rodríguez's story is a heart-wrenching reminder of the dangers hidden in love's promises. It's a tale of a woman who believed in a dream only to find herself ensnared by a predator. The San Jose Lagoon, once a place of quiet beauty, now holds a darker truth, its waters whispering of loss and betrayal. As the rain falls harder, blurring the edges of this tragedy, we're left to ponder how many others are trapped in relationships that promise love but deliver death. Keishla's light was extinguished, but her legacy burns on, a call to action in a world too often blind to the shadows within. Part 6. The wrongful conviction of Jane Anchor Hilton. The rain falls in a somber rhythm, each drop a quiet echo of justice delayed. In a small California town, a woman named Jane Anchor Hilton met a brutal end, her life snuffed out in a moment of unthinkable violence. But the tragedy of her death was only the beginning. What followed was a miscarriage of justice that stole 15 years from an innocent man, a web of lies spun by a desperate witness, and a relentless fight to uncover the truth. This is the story of Jane Anchor Hilton's murder, a tale of betrayal, redemption, and the haunting power of science to rewrite the past. Lie back, let the rain draw you into the shadows, and prepare for a journey through a case that will grip your heart and challenge your faith in the system. Jane Anchor Hilton was a woman of quiet grace. Born in 1955, she grew up in El Dorado County, California, a place of rolling hills and tight-knit communities. Jane was a single mother, raising her young daughter Autumn with a fierce love that defined her. By day, she worked as a secretary, her steady presence a comfort to colleagues. By night, she poured her heart into Autumn, filling their modest home with warmth and laughter. Jane was no stranger to hardship. Her marriage had ended years earlier, leaving her to navigate life's challenges alone, but she faced them with resilience. Friends described her as kind, dependable, and fiercely protective of her daughter. At 44, Jane was content, her life simple but full. On the night of July 5, 1998, Jane's world was shattered. She was found dead in her home, her body sprawled in the bedroom, blood pooling beneath her. She had been stabbed multiple times, her throat slashed with a savagery that spoke of rage. Autumn, just 9 years old, was home but unharmed. A detail that would later fuel endless speculation. The scene was chaotic. Blood smeared on the walls, a broken lamp, signs of a struggle. Police arrived, their flashlights cutting through the darkness, and what they saw seared into their minds. A mother, taken in the prime of her life. Her daughter, left to face a world without her. The investigation focused on Jane's inner circle. She had no known enemies, no debts, no reason for anyone to want her dead. But one name kept surfacing: Ricky Davis, Jane's live-in boyfriend. Ricky, a 34-year-old mechanic, had been with Jane for 2 years. Their relationship was stable, though not without its tensions. Arguments over money and parenting were occasional, but never violent. On the night of the murder, Ricky claimed he'd been out with friends, returning home after midnight to find Jane dead. He called 911, his voice frantic, but police were skeptical. His story seemed too convenient, his grief too rehearsed. They brought him in for questioning, and under pressure, Ricky's nerves frayed, his answers inconsistent. It was enough to make him their prime suspect. Enter Connie Dahl, a 19-year-old drifter who had been staying with Jane and Ricky for a few weeks. Connie was a troubled young woman battling addiction and a chaotic past. She was also at the house that night sleeping in a spare room with Autumn. When police questioned her, Connie's story was a mess of contradictions. She claimed she'd heard nothing, seen nothing, but her nervous demeanor raised red flags. Detectives leaned hard, threatening her with jail time, and Connie cracked. Over multiple interrogations, she wove a chilling tale. Ricky had come home drunk, argued with Jane, and stabbed her in a fit of rage. Connie said she saw blood on Autumn's clothes, implying the child had witnessed the crime. In one version, Connie even claimed she'd bitten Jane during the struggle, a detail that seemed plucked from a nightmare. Her stories shifted with each telling, but police latched onto the one that fit their theory: Ricky was the killer. Based on Connie's testimony, Ricky was arrested and charged with second-degree murder. The trial in 2000 was a spectacle of emotion and doubt. Connie took the stand, her voice trembling as she recounted her version of events. The prosecution painted Ricky as a volatile man, driven to violence by a toxic relationship. Autumn, now 11, testified vaguely, her memories muddled by trauma and coaching from investigators. The defense argued that Connie's story was unreliable, a patchwork of lies told to save herself. They pointed to the lack of physical evidence: no blood on Ricky, no murder weapon, no clear motive. But the jury, swayed by Connie's tears and the horror of Jane's death, convicted Ricky. He was sentenced to 16 years to life, his protests of innocence drowned out by the gavel's fall. Ricky's life behind bars was a slow bleed of hope. He maintained his innocence, writing letters to anyone who might listen: lawyers, journalists, even Jane's family. "I loved her," he wrote. "I'd never hurt her." Meanwhile, Connie walked free, her role in the case reduced to a minor charge of accessory after the fact. She served a year in jail, then disappeared into a life of addiction, dying of an overdose in 2014. Her death closed one chapter, but left the truth buried. Jane's murder seemed solved, but for those who knew Ricky, doubts lingered. Was Connie's story the whole truth, or had she hidden something darker? In 2005, a glimmer of hope emerged. The Northern California Innocence Project, NCIP, took up Ricky's case. Drawn by the shaky foundation of his conviction, Connie's inconsistent statements were a red flag, as was the absence of forensic evidence tying Ricky to the crime. The NCIP team dug into the case, re-examining the physical evidence with tools unavailable in 1998. They tested Jane's nightgown and fingernail clippings, using advanced DNA analysis to search for traces of the killer. The results were stunning. The DNA found was from an unknown male. Not Ricky, not Connie, not Autumn. It was a breakthrough that turned the case on its head. The DNA suggested a third party, someone who'd been in that bedroom, someone who'd slipped through the crack. The NCIP pushed for a new trial, but the road was long. California's legal system was slow to admit mistakes, and prosecutors clung to Connie's testimony, arguing the DNA could be incidental. But in 2017, a new law allowed for convictions to be challenged based on fresh evidence. The NCIP seized the opportunity, presenting the DNA findings alongside Connie's unreliable statements. In 2020, Ricky's conviction was vacated and he walked free after 15 years in prison, his face etched with both relief and rage. "I lost everything," he told reporters, "but I never lost hope." The search for Jane's true killer continued. Using genetic genealogy, a technique that had cracked cold cases nationwide, investigators traced the unknown DNA to Michael Green, a man who'd been 17 at the time of the murder. Green was a friend of Autumn's older relatives, a peripheral figure who'd been in and out of Jane's life. In 2020, police arrested Green, now in his late 30s, living a quiet life in Nevada. Under interrogation, he confessed, claiming the murder was a spur-of-the-moment act. He said he'd gone to Jane's house to steal, panicked when she confronted him, and stabbed her in a frenzy. His story was thin. Jane's wounds suggested intent, not panic. But he took a plea deal, avoiding a trial. In 2022, Green was sentenced to 15 years to life, his confession closing a case that had haunted El Dorado County for decades. Ricky, now free, faced a world that had moved on without him. He sued the state, seeking $18 million, 0 cents, for the years stolen from him, and received over $750,000, 0 cents, in compensation. But money couldn't erase the scars. Lost relationships, a tarnished name. The knowledge that Jane's killer had walked free while he suffered. Ricky rebuilt his life, slowly finding solace in advocacy for the wrongfully convicted. Jane deserved better, he said. We all did. Autumn, now an adult, grappled with the trauma of her mother's death and the lies that shaped her childhood. She distanced herself from the case, seeking peace in anonymity. The shadows of this case stretch far beyond the courtroom. Why did Connie lie? Was she coerced by police, desperate to escape scrutiny, or did she know more than she let on? Her claim of biting Jane, though dismissed, hints at a deeper involvement never fully explored. And what of Michael Green? His confession feels incomplete, a convenient narrative to avoid a harsher sentence. Did he act alone, or was someone else in that house? Their role erased by time. The DNA evidence, a triumph of science, raises its own questions. How many other innocents languish in cells, waiting for truth to find them? Jane Anchor Hilton's story is a gut-wrenching reminder of the fragility of justice. It's a tale of a mother stolen, a man wronged, and a system that failed them both. The house where Jane died stands quiet now, its walls holding secrets that may never fully surface. As the rain falls harder, blurring the edges of this tragedy, we're left to wonder how many other truths lie buried, waiting for the light of science to set them free. Jane's memory endures, a call for vigilance in a world where innocence can be a casualty of haste. Part 7, The Fall of Matthew Winkler. The rain weaves a gentle shroud, its soft patter masking the echoes of a tragedy that shook a small Tennessee town. In Selmer, a place where faith and family were the bedrock of life, a man named Matthew Winkler stood as a pillar of his community, a pastor whose sermons inspired hope. But on March 22, 2006, Matthew's life ended in a single shattering gunshot. And the woman accused of pulling the trigger was the one he'd vowed to love forever. This is the story of Matthew Winkler's murder, a tale of hidden pain, a marriage fractured by control, and a courtroom battle that divided a town. Lie back, let the rain pull you into the shadows, and prepare for a journey through a case that will leave you questioning where love ends and desperation begins. Matthew Winkler was a man of conviction. Born in 1974, he grew up steeped in the Church of Christ, his faith a guiding star from childhood. Matthew was charismatic with a warm smile and a voice that could move a congregation to tears. After studying theology, he became a pastor, his sermons blending scripture with a relatable charm that drew people to him. By 2006, at 31, he led the 4th Street Church of Christ in Selmer, Tennessee, a small town of 4,500 where everyone knew everyone. Matthew was more than a pastor. He was a husband to Mary, his college sweetheart, and a father to their 3 daughters, aged 8, 6, and 1. To the outside world, the Winklers were a model family, devoted, God-fearing, unbreakable. But behind the closed doors of their parsonage, a different story unfolded. Mary Winkler, 32, was a quiet, reserved woman, her life shaped by her role as a pastor's wife. She was expected to be perfect, supportive, submissive, always smiling. Friends described her as kind but withdrawn, her eyes often betraying a weariness no one could name. Mary and Matthew's marriage, once a partnership of shared faith, had grown strained. Matthew was controlling, his expectations rigid. He demanded Mary adhere to strict rules, how she dressed, how she raised the girls, how she managed their finances. Whispers of verbal and emotional abuse surfaced, though Mary rarely spoke of it. To her, the church was a refuge but also a cage, its scrutiny amplifying her isolation. On the morning of March 22, 2006, the parsonage was quiet. Matthew had been preparing for a midweek service, his Bible open on the kitchen table. Mary was home with the girls, the routine of their lives unbroken. But sometime before noon, a single shotgun blast shattered the silence. Matthew was found in the bedroom, a bullet in his back, blood seeping into the carpet. He was dead before paramedics arrived. The girls were safe, tucked away in another room, but Mary was gone, along with the family minivan. The discovery sent shockwaves through Selmer. A pastor, gunned down in his own home? The town reeled, their grief tinged with disbelief. Who could do this to a man of God? Police issued an Amber Alert, fearing for the safety of Mary and the girls. The next day, March 23rd, they were found 400 miles away in Orange Beach, Alabama, at a beachside arcade. Mary was calm, almost detached, playing with her daughters as if nothing had happened. The minivan was packed with clothes and toys, suggesting a planned escape. Police took Mary into custody, her expression unreadable as she was questioned. The girls were unharmed, their innocence a stark contrast to the horror unfolding. Back in Selmer, the congregation gathered to pray, their faith tested by the unthinkable. Mary Winkler, the pastor's wife, was the prime suspect in his murder. Mary's initial silence gave way to a confession, but it was a story shrouded in fog. She admitted to shooting Matthew, but claimed it was an accident. She said they'd been arguing about money, about his control, about a financial scam he'd pressured her into. Mary described years of abuse, verbal tirades, emotional manipulation, and, she hinted, physical harm. She said Matthew had forced her into uncomfortable sexual acts, his demands leaving her humiliated. On that morning, she said, the argument escalated. Matthew was berating her, his voice rising, when she grabbed his shotgun from the closet, intending only to scare him. It just went off, she told police, her voice trembling. She couldn't recall the details, only the panic that followed. She fled with the girls, desperate to protect them from the fallout. The investigation painted a more complex picture. The shotgun, a 12-gauge kept for hunting, had been fired at close range, the bullet entering Matthew's back as he lay in bed. The angle suggested intent, not a spontaneous mishap. Mary's claim of a financial scam checked out. Investigators found evidence of a check-kiting scheme with thousands of dollars funneled through their accounts. Matthew had orchestrated it, but Mary's signatures were on the documents, implicating her. The abuse allegations were harder to verify. Friends recalled Matthew's domineering nature, but no one had seen bruises or heard Mary complain of violence. The girls, too young to testify clearly, offered no insight. The case was a tangle of he said, she said, with one voice forever silenced. Mary's trial in 2007 was a media circus, Selmer's quiet streets overrun with reporters. The prosecution argued that Mary had killed Matthew deliberately, driven by resentment and fear of exposure in the financial scam. They pointed to her flight to Alabama, her calm demeanor at the arcade, as evidence of a calculated mind. She shot him in the back, the prosecutor said, and left him to die while she ran. The defense countered with a portrait of Mary as a victim, trapped in a marriage that crushed her spirit. They called psychologists to testify about battered woman syndrome, arguing that Mary's actions were a desperate response to years of abuse. Mary took the stand, her voice soft but steady, describing Matthew's control, his temper, the shame she carried. I just wanted it to stop, she said, tears streaming down her face. The jury faced an impossible task. Untangle truth from emotion. Selmer's residents were divided. Some saw Mary as a monster, others as a woman pushed to the edge. After hours of deliberation, the jury returned a verdict: guilty of voluntary manslaughter, not murder. The decision stunned both sides. Mary was sentenced to 210 days in jail, with credit for time served, and 2 months of mental health treatment. She walked free in August 2007, less than a year after Matthew's death. The light sentence sparked outrage among Matthew's family, who believed Mary had manipulated the jury with her tears. She took his life, his mother said, and got away with it. Mary's return to society was fraught with tension. She fought for custody of her daughters, who had been living with Matthew's parents. In 2008, a judge granted her partial custody, a decision that deepened the rift with the Winkler family. Mary moved to McMinnville, Tennessee, working low-profile jobs and avoiding the spotlight. She spoke rarely of the case, her silence a shield against a world that judged her. The financial scam was never prosecuted, its details buried with Matthew. Selmer's 4th Street Church of Christ rebuilt, calling a new pastor, but Matthew's absence lingered, his sermons a memory etched in the pews. The shadows of this case stretch far beyond the parsonage. Was Mary a victim driven to a breaking point by abuse, or a calculating killer who used her story to escape justice? Her claim of an accidental shooting clashes with the physical evidence, yet her tears on the stand felt raw, unfeigned. Matthew's role as an abuser remains murky. His public persona was flawless, but private control can leave no visible scars. So the financial scam adds another layer, a motive that muddies both their stories. And what of the girls, caught between a mother's love and their father's legacy? Their lives, shaped by trauma, are a silent testament to the cost of that fatal morning. Matthew Winkler's story is a haunting exploration of the lines between love and control, faith and fear. It's a tale of a man whose light was extinguished, a woman whose truth remains contested, and a community forced to confront the flaws in its heroes. The parsonage, now home to another family, stands as a quiet reminder of a marriage that crumbled under its own weight. As the rain falls harder, blurring the edges of this tragedy, we're left to ponder. Where does desperation end and intent begin? Matthew's voice is gone, but Mary's silence speaks volumes. A riddle wrapped in sorrow that may never be solved. Part 8, The Locked Room of Siobhan McLaughlin. The rain weaves a mournful tapestry at steady rhythm, cloaking the secrets of a Dublin street. In the heart of Ireland's capital, a woman named Siobhan McLaughlin lived a life of quiet strength. Her warmth, a beacon to those who knew her. But on February 28, 2006, Siobhan was found dead in her locked bedroom, her body staged to tell a lie. What followed was a chilling investigation that uncovered a marriage poisoned by control, a killer hiding in plain sight, and a family's fight for justice against a system that silenced them. This is the story of Siobhan McLaughlin, a tale of betrayal, manipulation, and the haunting truth behind a locked door. Lie back, let the rain pull you into the shadows, and prepare for a journey through a case that will linger like a ghost in the night. Siobhan McLaughlin was a woman of resilience and grace. Born in 1968, she grew up in a working-class Dublin neighborhood, her laughter and kindness making her a favorite among friends and family. Siobhan was a dreamer with a love for art and music that colored her world. She worked as a receptionist at a local clinic, her gentle demeanor putting patients at ease. At 38, she was a devoted mother to her teenage daughter, Saoirse, and a wife to Brian Kearney, a businessman she'd married a decade earlier. To the outside world, Siobhan and Brian were a stable couple, their home in Goatstown, a haven of middle-class comfort. But beneath the surface, cracks were forming, invisible to all but those closest to her. Siobhan's marriage to Brian was a study in contrasts. Brian, 45, was a property developer with a sharp mind and a sharper temper. He was charming in public, but at home, he was controlling, his need for dominance suffocating Siobhan. He monitored her spending, limited her social life, and isolated her from her family, particularly her sister Fiona, with whom Siobhan shared a deep bond. Siobhan confided in Fiona about Brian's behavior, his verbal tirades, his insistence on controlling every aspect of their lives. "He's changed," Siobhan whispered during one of their rare phone calls. "I don't know how much more I could take." Yet she stayed for Saoirse, for the hope that things might improve. On the morning of February 28, 2006, Siobhan's world came to a halt. Brian left the house early, claiming a business meeting while Saoirse was at school. Siobhan was alone, her day filled with routine tasks. Around noon, Brian returned, saying he'd forgotten some documents. What happened next remained shrouded in mystery, but by 2 p.m., Siobhan was dead. Her body was discovered by a neighbor who noticed the house unusually quiet and found the front door ajar. The neighbor called Gardaí, Ireland's police force, who entered the home and found a scene that chilled them to the core. Siobhan lay on her bedroom floor, the door locked from the inside, a vacuum cleaner cord wrapped tightly around her neck. At first glance, it looked like suicide. The locked room, the cord, the absence of forced entry, all pointed to a woman who'd taken her own life. But the Gardaí were skeptical. Siobhan's body bore signs of violence, bruises on her arms, a fractured larynx, and abrasions that suggested a struggle. The cord was tied with precision, not the chaotic knot of a desperate act. The room itself was staged, the vacuum cleaner positioned to suggest Siobhan had been cleaning. Forensic experts confirmed the truth. Siobhan had been strangled. Her death, a deliberate act disguised as something else. The locked room was a lie, a puzzle designed to mislead. But who would go to such length to kill her? The investigation zeroed in on Brian Kearney. His alibi was shaky. He claimed to have been at a meeting, but witnesses placed him at home during the critical hours. His demeanor raised red flags. He was cold, almost indifferent, offering little grief for a man who'd lost his wife. Gardaí searched the house, finding Siobhan's diary hidden in a drawer. Its pages were a heartbreaking chronicle of her marriage. Entries detailing Brian's control, his anger, her growing fear. "I want to leave," she wrote, "but I'm afraid of what he'll do." The diary was a window into Siobhan's private hell, and it pointed to a motive, Brian's fear of losing control, especially as Siobhan grew bolder in asserting her independence. The evidence mounted. Brian's DNA was found on the vacuum cord, a detail he couldn't explain. Phone records showed he'd been at the house longer than he claimed, his movements inconsistent with his story. A neighbor recalled hearing Ray's voices that morning, a rare glimpse of discord in the Carney home. The locked room, initially a baffling clue, was unraveled by forensics. The window had been tampered with, allowing Brian to exit and re-enter, locking the door from the outside to stage the scene. It was a calculated act, one that required planning and a chilling disregard for Siobhan's life. Brian was arrested in March 2006, charged with murder. The case gripped Dublin, a city unaccustomed to such intimate, calculated crimes. Siobhan's family, led by Fiona, became vocal advocates, demanding justice for a woman whose voice had been silenced, but Brian was defiant, pleading not guilty and claiming Siobhan's death was self-inflicted. His defense team argued that the diary reflected her mental instability, not his abuse, and that the DNA evidence was circumstantial. They painted Brian as a grieving husband, unfairly targeted by a rush to judgment. The prosecution countered with a meticulous case, weaving together the forensic evidence, Siobhan's diary, and Brian's lies. He killed her to keep her silent, the prosecutor said, and staged the scene to escape justice. The trial in 2008 was a clash of narratives. Fiona took the stand, her voice steady as she described Siobhan's fear of Brian, her plans to leave him. She was trapped, Fiona said, but she was finding her strength. Saoirse, now 15, did not testify, her trauma too raw to expose in court. The locked room became a focal point, with forensic experts dismantling Brian's suicide theory. The jury, after days of deliberation, returned a verdict: guilty of murder. Brian was sentenced to life in prison, Ireland's harshest penalty, with no possibility of parole for at least 12 years. He showed no emotion, his eyes fixed on the floor as he was led away. For Siobhan's family, the victory was marred by pain. They were denied the chance to read a victim impact statement in court, a decision that felt like another silencing of Siobhan's story. Fiona channeled her grief into advocacy, speaking out about coercive control, a form of abuse that leaves no bruises but destroys lives. Siobhan's death wasn't just a murder, Fiona said. It was the end of a long, invisible battle. Saoirse, now an adult, struggled to reconcile her mother's love with her father's betrayal, choosing a life away from the public eye. The Goatstown house, once a place of warmth, was sold, its new owners unaware of the tragedy it held. The shadows of this case stretch far beyond the locked room. Why did Brian Kearney, a man with wealth and status, resort to such a desperate act? Was it pride, fear of losing Siobhan, or a deeper darkness that festered within him? The stage scene, so meticulously crafted, suggests a mind capable of chilling calculation, yet he underestimated the power of science to unravel his lies. Siobhan's diary, a silent witness to her pain, raises its own questions. How many others suffer in silence, their cries unheard until it's too late? And what of the locked room itself? A metaphor for a marriage that's trapped Siobhan in life as much as in death. Siobhan McLaughlin's story is a haunting reminder of the dangers hidden in the places we call home. It's a tale of a woman whose strength was her undoing, a man whose control became his downfall, and a family left to pick up the pieces. The bedroom where Siobhan died is empty now, its secrets laid bare, but the echoes of her struggle remain. As the rain falls harder, blurring the edges of this tragedy, we're left to ponder: how many locked rooms hide truths that no one dares to face? Siobhan's light was extinguished, but her story burns on, a call to listen to those whose voices are stifled by fear. Part 9, the brutal end of Alicia. The rain falls in a relentless murmur, its cadence a somber echo of a life cut short. In the quiet suburb of Markham, Ontario, a young woman named Alicia Ross lived, with a vibrancy that lit up the world around her. She was a dreamer, a daughter, a friend whose laughter was a melody in the lives she touched. But on the night of August 16, 2005, Alicia stepped out of her home to bid farewell to her boyfriend and vanished into the darkness. What followed was a desperate search, a shocking confession, and a truth so brutal it would haunt a community forever. This is the story of Alicia Ross, a tale of innocence shattered, a killer next door, and the fragile line between safety and savagery. Lie back, let the rain draw you into the shadows, and prepare for a journey through a case that will chill you to the bone. Alicia Ross was a spark of light. Born in 1980, she grew up in a loving family, the youngest of two siblings in a close-knit Markham neighborhood. Alicia was bright, with a creative spirit that shone through her work. As a graphic designer, her days were filled with sketching, brainstorming, and dreaming of a career that would leave her mark on the world. At 25, she was finding her footing, balancing her job with a budding romance with her boyfriend, Sean. Friends described her as warm, witty, and fiercely loyal, the kind of person who could make a stranger feel like family. To her parents, Ted and Sharon, she was their pride, a daughter whose optimism was infectious. Alicia's life was full of promise, her future a canvas waiting to be painted. On the evening of August 16, 2005, Alicia was at home, a modest house she shared with her parents. Sean had come over for dinner, the two laughing over shared stories as the summer night deepened. Around 11 p.m., Sean prepared to leave, and Alicia walked him to his car, a routine gesture in their relationship. They stood in the driveway, talking under the glow of a street lamp, their voices soft in the quiet suburb. "I'll call you tomorrow," Alicia said, waving as Sean drove off. She turned to head back inside, the house just steps away. But in that fleeting moment, Alicia vanished. The night swallowed her whole, leaving no trace, no scream, no clue. When Alicia didn't return inside, Sharon grew uneasy. She checked the driveway, the backyard, calling Alicia's name into the stillness. By midnight, panic set in. Ted called Sean, who confirmed he'd left Alicia unharmed. The Ross family contacted the York Regional Police, their voices trembling as they reported her missing. She wouldn't just leave, Sharon insisted. Something's wrong. The police launched a search, combing the neighborhood with flashlights and dogs. Volunteers joined in, knocking on doors, scouring parks and ravines. Alicia's face appeared on flyers, her bright smile a stark contrast to the words "missing" in bold red. The community rallied, their hope tempered by a growing dread. The investigation focused on Sean, the last person to see Alicia. He was cooperative, offering his car for inspection and submitting to a polygraph test, which he passed. His alibi was airtight, confirmed by phone records and witnesses. With Sean cleared, police widened their net, interviewing neighbors and checking security footage. The Ross family clung to hope, organizing vigils and media appeals. "Alicia, if you're out there, we love you," Ted said, his voice breaking on national television. But weeks passed with no leads, no sightings, no answers. The case grew cold, Alicia's absence a wound that refused to heal. Then, on September 20, 2005, a bombshell shattered the silence. Daniel Sylvester, a 31-year-old neighbor who lived 2 houses down from the Rosses, walked into a police station and confessed. "I killed Alicia," he said, his voice flat, his eyes vacant. The confession stunned investigators. Sylvester was a recluse, a loner with no criminal record, known for keeping to himself. His sudden admission, delivered without prompting, was as baffling as it was horrifying. He led police to a wooded area 30 miles away where Alicia's remains were found, her body battered beyond recognition. The autopsy revealed a brutal truth. Alicia had been beaten to death, her skull fractured, 33 bones broken in a frenzy of violence that spoke of unrestrained rage. Sylvester's story was chilling. He claimed he'd been outside his house that night, smoking in his backyard when Alicia walked by. He called out to her, making a crude remark about her appearance. Alicia, unafraid, snapped back, her words cutting. Enraged, Sylvester attacked, dragging her into his yard and beating her with his fists and a piece of wood. When he realized she was dead, he panicked, loading her body into his car and driving to the remote site to hide it. He returned home, cleaned up, and resumed his life as if nothing had happened. The confession was detailed, but it left gaps. Why such extreme violence? Why Alicia, a woman he barely knew? The evidence backed Sylvester's story. Forensic analysis found traces of Alicia's blood in his backyard, on a pair of his shoes, and in his car's trunk. The wood he described, recovered from his property, bore her DNA. His car's GPS data confirmed a late-night trip to the dump site. But the scene itself raised questions. Alicia's belongings, her phone, a sandal, a pack of cigarettes, were found neatly arranged in Sylvester's yard, as if placed with care. Was this remorse, a ritual, or something darker? Sylvester offered no explanation, his demeanor eerily detached. Psychologists later diagnosed him with antisocial personality disorder, noting his lack of empathy and history of social isolation. The trial in 2007 was a crucible of grief. The Ross family filled the courtroom, their pain palpable. Sharon took the stand, clutching a photo of Alicia, her voice steady as she described her daughter's dreams, her kindness, her stolen future. "She was our light," she said, glaring at Sylvester. Ted recounted the agony of the search, the hope that died with each passing day. The prosecution presented a damning case. The blood, the GPS, Sylvester's own words, they painted him as a predator, a man whose rage exploded when challenged by a woman who refused to cower. The defense argued that Sylvester's confession was coerced, his mental state unstable, but the evidence was overwhelming. The jury convicted him of second-degree murder, and he was sentenced to life with a chance of parole after 16 years. A punishment many felt was too lenient for such a savage act. For the Ross family, the verdict was a hollow victory. Alicia was gone, her dreams reduced to memories. Ted and Sharon channeled their grief into advocacy, supporting families of missing persons and pushing for stronger victim protections. "Alicia's story isn't just ours," Sharon said. "It's a warning to trust your instincts." The Markham community, once a haven of safety, grappled with the knowledge that a killer had lived among them unnoticed. Sylvester's house, now abandoned, became a grim landmark, its windows dark, its yard overgrown. The shadows of this case stretch far beyond the courtroom. What drove Daniel Sylvester to such a brutal act? Was Alicia's sharp retort the spark, or had his rage been simmering, waiting for a target? The arranged belongings, a detail so out of place, suggest a mind that operated on its own twisted logic. Yet, Sylvester offered no insight. His confession, unprompted and abrupt, raises its own questions. Was it guilt, a need for attention, or a calculated move to control the narrative? And what of Sean, briefly a suspect whose life was upended by suspicion? The pain of being doubted lingers, a secondary wound in a case already steeped in loss. Alicia Ross' story is a heart-wrenching reminder of the fragility of safety. It's a tale of a woman whose life was stolen in a moment of senseless violence, a killer whose darkness hid in plain sight, and a family left to carry the weight of absence. The driveway where Alicia last stood remains unchanged, a silent witness to a night that altered everything. As the rain falls harder, blurring the edges of this tragedy, we're left to ponder. How many others walk among us, their anger a ticking bomb, waiting to explode? Alicia's light was extinguished, but her memory burns on. A call to cherish those we love before the night claims them. Part 10, The Scandal of Elliot Spitzer. The rain falls in a steady whisper, its rhythm a veil over the ambitions and failures of those who walk the corridors of power. In the glittering heart of New York, a man named Elliot Spitzer rose to prominence as a crusader for justice, his name synonymous with integrity. But on March 10th, 2008, his world crumbled under the weight of a scandal that exposed a double life, shattering his legacy and revealing the fragility of trust. This is the story of Elliot Spitzer's fall, a tale of hubris, hypocrisy, and the high price of secrets in a city that never sleeps. Lie back, let the rain draw you into the shadows, and prepare for a journey through a case that stripped bare the myth of a hero. Elliot Spitzer was a force of nature. Born in 1959 to a wealthy New York family, he was groomed for greatness from an early age. Brilliant and driven, he graduated from Princeton and Harvard Law, his intellect matched by a fierce moral compass. Spitzer's career began as a prosecutor, but he made his mark as New York's Attorney General from 1999 to 2006. Earning the nickname Sheriff of Wall Street, he took on corrupt corporations, dismantled organized crime, and championed the little guy, his relentless pursuit of justice making him a folk hero. In 2006, he was elected governor of New York by a landslide, his promise to reform Albany's murky politics resonating with the weary public. At 48, Spitzer was a husband to Silda, a father to 3 daughters, and a man poised to shape the nation's future, perhaps even from the White House. But beneath the polished exterior of Spitzer's public life, a shadow loomed. His intensity, a strength in the courtroom, strained his personal relationships. Colleagues whispered of his temper, his need for control. Silda, a lawyer who'd given up her career to support him, stood by his side, but friends noticed a distance in her eyes. Spitzer's work consumed him, leaving little room for the warmth of family life. He thrived on risk, on pushing boundaries, a trait that fueled his success but also sowed the seeds of his downfall. In the high-stakes world of politics, where every move is scrutinized, Spitzer believed he could keep his secrets hidden. he was wrong. The unraveling began in late 2007 when federal investigators stumbled onto something peculiar. A routine probe into money laundering flagged suspicious transactions linked to a high-end escort service called Emperor's Club, VIP. The agency catered to wealthy clients, offering discreet encounters with women at prices that reached thousands of dollars per hour. Wiretaps revealed a client known as George Fox arranged meetings with meticulous care, wiring payments through shell accounts to avoid detection. The FBI, intrigued by the client's secrecy, dug deeper. In January 2008, they uncovered the truth. George Fox was Elliot Spitzer, the governor of New York, the man who'd built his career prosecuting vice and corruption. The details were staggering. Spitzer had been a regular client of Emperor's Club for at least a year, spending upwards of $80,000, 0 cents on encounters. His most recent rendezvous on February 13, 2008 was with a 22-year-old escort named Ashley Dupre at a Washington, D.C. hotel. Meeting, costing $4,300, 0 cents, was arranged with precision. Spitzer wired the payment, booked the room, and even specified the time. Wiretap calls captured his voice, calm but demanding, ensuring every detail was perfect. For a man who'd spent his career exposing others' misdeeds, Spitzer's recklessness was breathtaking. He operated as if untouchable, blind to the net closing around him. On March 10, 2008, the New York Times broke the story. Spitzer linked to prostitution ring. The headline sent shockwaves through the nation. The sheriff of Wall Street, the man who'd preached accountability, was a hypocrite. His moral crusades a facade. The details poured out: wiretaps, bank records. Ashley Dupre's identity splashed across tabloids. New Yorkers, accustomed to political scandals, were stunned by the scale of Spitzer's betrayal. His image as a family man, a reformer, a beacon of ethics, crumbled overnight. The state capitol in Albany buzzed with disbelief, allies distancing themselves, enemies sharpening their knives. Spitzer's response was swift but futile. On March 12th, flanked by a pale, stoic Silda, he addressed the press. "I have acted in a way that violates my obligations to my family," he said, his voice hollow. "I have disappointed and failed to live up to the standard I expected of myself." He resigned as governor. Effective March 17th, his political career in ashes. The room was silent, the weight of his words hanging heavy. Silda's presence, a silent show of loyalty, sparked debate. Why stand by a man who'd humiliated her? For Spitzer, the resignation was a desperate bid to salvage what little dignity remained, but the damage was irreparable. The investigation into Emperor's Club continued, but Spitzer escaped criminal charges. The Mann Act, which prohibits transporting someone across state lines for prostitution, didn't apply. Ashley Dupre was already in D.C. Money laundering charges were considered, but prosecutors deemed the evidence too thin. The lack of legal consequences baffled many. Spitzer's wealth and connections, they argued, had shielded him. The escort agency was dismantled, its operators convicted, but Spitzer walked free, his punishment delivered by the court of public opinion. His name became a punchline, his legacy a cautionary tale. The fallout was profound. Silda, humiliated by the public spectacle, separated from Spitzer in 2013, their marriage unable to withstand the strain. Their daughters, teenagers at the time, faced the cruelty of whispers and headlines, their father's shame, a shadow over their lives. Spitzer attempted a comeback, launching a cable news show and running for New York City comptroller in 2013, but voters rejected him. Their trust shattered. He retreated to his family's real estate business, a far cry from the halls of power he'd once commanded. Ashley Dupre, briefly a media sensation, faded from the spotlight, her role in the scandal a footnote in her own story. A Spitzer scandal exposed the underbelly of power, how privilege can breed entitlement, how ideals can mask flaws. It also sparked a broader reckoning. In 2008, New York's political elite faced scrutiny, with Spitzer's fall a warning to others. The media, too, grappled with its role, criticized for sensationalizing Dupre's life, while ignoring the systemic issues of sex work and exploitation. Feminists debated Silda's decision to stand by Spitzer, some seeing it as strength, others as surrender. The scandal reshaped Albany, with Spitzer's successor, David Patterson, struggling to restore faith in a tarnished government. But the shadows of this case stretch far beyond New York. What drove Elliot Spitzer, a man with everything to lose, to risk it all? Was it arrogance? A belief he'd never be caught? or a deeper compulsion that defied his public persona. The meticulous planning, shell accounts, coded names, suggests a man who knew the stakes yet couldn't resist. And what of Silda, whose silence spoke louder than words? Her choice to stand by him, then leave, is a story of resilience and pain, a private tragedy played out on a public stage. The Emperor's Club, a shadowy enterprise catering to the elite, raises its own questions. How many others, untarnished by scandal, still walk free? Elliot Spitzer's story is a stark reminder of the fragility of trust. It's a tale of a man who soared to dizzying heights only to plummet when his secrets were laid bare. The hotel room in D.C. where Spitzer met Dupree is long since cleaned, its walls holding no trace of the encounter that changed history. As the rain falls harder, blurring the edges of this scandal, we're left to ponder. How many heroes hide flaws that could undo them? Spitzer's name, once a symbol of justice, is now a warning. Power corrupts, and even the mighty can fall. As the rain softens to a whisper, we step back from the shadows, carrying the weight of 10 stories that have unraveled the darkest corners of the human heart. From the brutal murder of Jane Hilton to the scandal that toppled Elliot Spitzer, these tales remind us how fragile trust can be, how quickly light can turn to darkness. Each case, whether driven by rage, betrayal, or desperation, leaves a mark, a question that lingers in the quiet of the night. How do we heal from such losses? How do we guard against the unseen dangers in those we love, or in ourselves? The families of Cory Desmond, Jackie Waller, Jamie Hann, Liz Maria Lopez, Keishla Rodríguez, Jane Hilton, Matthew Winkler, Siobhan McLaughlin, and Alicia Ross carry their grief like a torch, lighting the way for justice, for change. Their strength is a testament to the enduring power of love, even in the face of unimaginable pain. Elliot Spitzer's fall, though bloodless, echoes their losses. A reminder that betrayal, in any form, leaves scars. These stories are not just history. They are warnings, lessons etched in the lives of those who came before us. Thank you for joining us on this journey through shadows of the past. If these tales have stirred something in you, share them, reflect on them. Let them remind you to hold your loved ones close. Subscribe for more stories that peel back the veil of the past and let the rain guide you into the next volume. Until then, sleep softly, but keep one eye open, for the shadows are never far away.